Dear ladies and gentlemen,
You can cry. Ви можете сміятися, тільки, будь ласка, сідайте.
please take your seats. I will present to you the person, an incredible person. It's a Swedish politician. There are many more girls than boys. And as far as I understand, girls are much more interested in economy than boys. I'm Darisha Sliva, I'm 1+1 journalist. I will moderate this discussion. This is a very well-known politician from Sweden. He used to be a member of Europarlament, deputy of the Swiss Parliament, specialist in recycling economy. So this is recycling economy. We'll be speaking about how to make our country better, how to make our economy stronger, and I will speak English. So those of you who know, please listen. And if you do not listen, please listen to interpreters. He asked me to call him not Dr. Wijkman, but Anders. So it's a very democratic approach.
I'm here, so please, can you tell us that you really think about the recycling economy as the best way to make countries more high level in economic problems? So is it possible for Ukraine to have a non-zero recycling economy or not? Or we are really not ready for that? Can you tell us, please?
Well, first of all, we have to be clear what the circular economy really means.
Tell us, please.
There is no clear-cut definition. If you go to a library, you can't really find a common definition that everybody would subscribe to. So it's more like a metaphor for using both energy and materials more efficiently. And to move from a system which we call a linear production system to one which is trying to close the loops. If you look at nature, there is practically no waste in nature. What is waste from one species is food for another species. So you have this wonderful ecosystem of different species who feed on each other. Mm-hmm. But in our human economy, we take materials very often from the mines. We use energy, we turn them into products, and then we use them for a few years, or maybe only for a day or a few months, and then we throw them away.
Like gas and oil, about Russia and Ukraine, yeah.
Yeah, but energy is one thing, but look at computers, look at household appliances, look at packaging, look at all kinds of things. Look at clothing today. We use it for a short period of time and then we throw it away. And the design is often such that you cannot really make use of the materials after the first use. So the idea behind the circular economy is, since we are becoming more and more people and economies are growing as we speak, there is simply not a possibility to continue, on the one hand, to demand more and more materials and energy, on the other hand, produce more and more pollution. We must put a brake on that, because our footprint that Graham Maxton talked about, ecological footprint, is increasing all the time, and we only have one Earth, so it won't work. So that's why we have to move in another direction. And the report I've written is really trying to show the bigger picture. What are the benefits for society if we would move in this direction, from linear to circular?
It's like new industry for us, for example, in Ukraine. What? New professions?
Well,
investors?
Well, it could be many, many things. One thing would be to move from selling stuff to offering services. Take my mobile phone. I now own this.
Oh my God, it's iPhone 4 or 2?
No, it's I think 4.
You do not like iPhone X?
Yeah.
Maybe Steve Jobs, even Apple use the recycling economy, I know that.
Pardon?
Apple, like a company, lots of American, European companies use recycling economy because they like energy and everything from wind. Do you know about that?
Don't.
They do not use.
They don't. They don't.
They're bad companies.
Apple has taken a decision a few months ago at their annual meeting that they will now start looking for recycled materials and give priority to that. But so far they don't pay any attention to this.
They're bad companies.
And if you look, well, bad. They are not conscious enough. But let's look at this mobile phone. I buy it, and the assumption from the company that has sold it is that I change it within 12 or 18 months, because there is all the time a new model. And when the new model comes, they have changed most of it, so I can't even use the old charger. I have to buy a new charger also. This one, you cannot change the battery. It's the same battery all the time. So when it is discarded, when I leave it behind, most of it is not recycled, although there is a lot of valuable materials. Let's think about it the other way. Let's say that I was renting or leasing this. Then it would be in the interest of Apple that it would last longer, that they could make use of the materials a second time, a third time, a fourth time. If they own the equipment all the time, it's like with a car or whatever. If you go from a buying stuff to a leasing and renting economy, that's one way of moving towards a circular economy, because that would change the business models. It would lead to longer product lives. You would not build in a lot of obsolescence into the telephones, etc. Another way of doing it is, of course, to make sure that when you design a product, after its first use, that you can take back the materials and use them again. But then you have to have a design where that works. Plastics, for instance, you have, I don't know how many different qualities of plastics. So when you collect plastics, you recycle plastics, you cannot do much with it.
Anders, can you name us a very great example, country example, company example that use this and is very famous and very
few companies. We are only in the very, very first starting phase of this.
It's like a high level of understanding.
Well,
like Zen level.
You know, as long as companies can offer products in the marketplace which don't have a long product life and which are not designed intelligently so that they can be recycled effectively, we are not moving towards the circular economy. So what I've described in my book is really the benefits of going in this way, and then what kind of policy measures would we need. And the interesting thing is, we have talked a lot about climate change today. If you would move towards a more circular economy, you would bring down carbon emissions very, very fast. Because if you recycle materials, you don't use as much energy as when you extract them from the mine. Aluminium, for instance, you use 10% if you reuse aluminium as compared to if you use the mine and have virgin materials. Plastics, it's the same. Copper, iron ore, etc. All these metals, you use much less energy, and since fossil fuels is the dominating energy source in society, you have a lot of CO2 emissions. So you would bring them down. And then an economy where you care for what you have produced, and you offer services more than just selling stuff, and you recycle, reuse, repair, maintain, that's an economy where you have more jobs. So there are so many benefits from this.
Ukraine, our business. Is it possible 5 years, 4 years? What's your prediction? Or it's too early to talk about this in Ukraine? Corruption, political system, what?
No, I don't think it's too early, but it has to be done in an international context. And there I think the European Union is probably the best one, because we live in a globalized market. So very few products are produced here, sold here, used here. They are sold all over the world, or you import things that are produced somewhere else. So then you have to have a global system, or at least a European system, which moves in the same direction. And that's what we are trying to push for now in Europe. Design requirements, standards, so that you don't flood the market with all kinds of different materials. Rather standardize it and design it so that you can reuse it. We have calculated, and the money that we threw away because of the present system, which is so wasteful, between 600 and 700 billion euros every year. It's being just thrown away. And most of it is either landing on the landfill or being incinerated. We make energy out of it.
6 billion.
No, 600 billion.
600 billion a year.
Yeah.
So much dresses and shoes, oh my God. I'm joking, like a woman.
But some of the big companies like IKEA, like H&M, like Zara, two textile companies, like Apple, as I said, they are now starting to move in this direction. It's still a long way, but they take steps.
If you give us an advice, which sphere of our Ukrainian companies, it's like oil companies, gas companies, or like chocolate companies, like Russian company of our president, should start first doing this job?
Well,
to make it spread all over the Ukraine.
Oil and gas companies is a non-starter, because once you have burnt your oil or your gas, it's gone.
Of course.
So that's why you should move towards renewable energy and alternative energy. So that's one of the steps in a circular economy. You walk on two legs. You reform the energy system and you reform the material system. I can give you an example why materials are so important. Steel, cement, aluminium and plastics is roughly 20%, 1/5 of all the carbon emissions in the world. And most of the infrastructure in many developing countries has not been built yet. If that happens with today's materials and with today's technologies, you can forget about any climate agreement, because it's just going to go up, go up, go up. That's why we need to think about the materials in a different way. When you build a house, for instance, you don't need so much steel and cement. You can use much more wood, as an example. And if you use wood, you store carbon in the wood, in the structure, for 50, 100, 150
Our
years.
countries sell wood to European Union, but we don't have even products from wood. We have these problems. Because European Union needs from us only wood, but do not need from us products.
What do they do with the wood?
They create products.
Yeah.
But our products they do not need.
If I were you, I would try to refine and add value and export much less wood, more products.
This is our problem number one, yes. Yeah. Because we like a raw country, no product country. We buy your automobiles, your everything, your machines, but only we have woods, gas and oil that is finished.
Yeah, that's a problem when you have lived on and benefited from exports of commodities for a long period of time and not diversified. Yes. Invested in production.
Creating something our, like chocolate, yes.
But this is something for many countries today. So, but if I were your government...
Oh, it will be so cool.
I would, no.
You can come to our politicians.
No, but if I were in your government, I would, of course, focus attention on... Yeah, using some of the raw materials that you now export to make value added. Of course I would.
Are you a dictator?
No.
That's why you can't work in our political system. Because in our political system, only dictators can win, and oligarchs.
Well, I must say that I feel a bit of sympathy with your government, because they are working under extremely difficult situations.
Really?
It's easy to criticize them, but if you have a warlike situation with Russia since the last 4 years, it drags resources from you, it takes up a lot of your time, and it's a constant security threat. So I can very well imagine that in some areas they are not cutting edge because they simply don't have the resources, the energy, the time.
The point is that war can explain everything, corruption, everything, because of war. Like, it's like Bertolt Brecht's story about Madame Courage that can sell everything during the war. But it's like we are slowly going to Donald Trump age. Does anyone know who is Donald Trump, guys? Хто знає, хто такий Дональд Трамп? Підніміть руки. Що, тільки одна рука чи що? А що, ліва сторона не знає?
Only one person knows who Donald Trump is.
I'm talking about Trump age and your last year in Berlin Congress speech, yes, and a short study about democracy. You've told that our democracy is broken. Yes? It's like...
Yeah, it is.
Because of the Brexit, because the US election, because the Donald Trump become a president. Or not because
that's just one
story.
Can
you
please
example? Explain for us if the US political system is broken and European political system is broken, what can we talk about Ukrainian political system and Ukrainian democracy? And first of all, our people can just do two things: sleep or make Maidans. Because we cannot push our government. We can just make like war or just come down. Our people do not go to vote because they are too busy. They do not want to vote. The election is not interesting for our country. Can you maybe say some advice, please, Anders?
Well, it's serious, of course.
Yeah.
But it's serious not only in Ukraine. I think we have a system crisis when it comes to party politics in many parts of the world. Also in my country, even if Scandinavia works relatively well. But even there you have less membership in the political parties. You have less interest in politics.
Why is so? We are not smart.
I think we have become a bit complacent. We have become a bit ignorant. We think that we have provided now a platform for the society's development that is more or less perfect, and we don't need to really be involved more, which is so dangerous because history tells us that nothing can be trusted for a long period of time. You have to regain things all the time. And democracy, human rights is something that you cannot take for granted. And I have seen it now in Sweden. We did get about 170,000 refugees between 2015 and 2016. Most of them from Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, etc. And the human rights situation now is pretty different from only 5-10 years ago when we thought we were perfect. And now we realize that we are not really good at integrating many of these people. And we have a lot of tension in society. Maybe we took on too many in too short period of time, but I think since everything is changing around us, technologies, policies, whatever, we have to be on our toes all the time and be prepared for new situations. And I think the political parties, they are sort of stuck in the industrial society logic. And they have not adjusted and adopted policies for the new age. And the new age is the digital age. And the new age is climate change, ecological constraints, resource constraints. And the new age is migration. And we have to be prepared for this. We have to try to prevent some of the crisis situations. We have to work together in a different way. European Union is also not really up to the task, in my opinion.
Anders, I can show you one small example about two different worlds. Our world and, for example, world of Canada. My friend and I usually talk on Skype and Viber. And I'm talking about political systems, corruptions, And she answers to me, "Oh, Dasha, I'm so terrified, so terrified." And then, what happened? Penguins, we should save penguins in Canada. She is thinking about how to save penguins, how to save green planet, nature. And we in Ukraine think about how to create another Maidan, how to fight against the corruption. We think about war. Is it possible in Ukraine right now not to think about corruption, but think to another IT technology, Steve Jobs working, Elon Musk system? Because we do not create, we create nothing. We're just fighting against corruption, war, and full of problems.
You know, there are no free lunches, and there are no quick fixes. I mean, you need education. You need a legal system that works, which controls corruption, and you need dialogue with your people. And again, it's more difficult to undertake in a situation where you have almost like a war with Russia. It's more difficult. We have to face that. And you have also had a legacy of quite a lot of corrupt governments after 1991, when the Soviet Union was terminated, terminated. But you know, we have so many examples in history of countries who were in a problematic situation like yours, and over 5 or 10 years got on their feet and moved ahead. And I've heard good examples today from entrepreneurs about, in particular, IT technology, and that here are some very talented people. So maybe that's one of the areas where you should really concentrate. But do it in a way that you involve all your people. You need to build broadband everywhere so that people can be connected, and not create a new situation where you have the elite up here earning a lot of revenue and all the people down here. You have to work to get the more inclusive economy.
One very famous and intelligent scientist, Ukrainian, usually tells each month, for me, one phrase, that we need one big breakthrough in our economy, in our country. We need 10 projects for 10 billion. If we have in our country 10 projects which costs 10 billion each project, we can win.
Yeah.
Can you, like a professor, tell us in which sphere can be these 10 billion projects in Ukraine to make breakthroughs?
It would be very arrogant from me to tell you, because I don't know enough about your country. But the
in which sphere? Tourism?
No, information technology is a huge area. We talk about almost everything, and it's a technology that penetrates every sector of society. So there are obviously quite a lot of opportunities if you have a lot of young talented entrepreneurs in that technology area to do breakthrough innovation. Absolutely. And I've seen some examples already in preparing for this. I read about some of the startups that are emerging here that are quite fascinating. The trick for the government will be to keep them in the country so that they don't sell them to the US or somewhere else. That's a problem we have had in Sweden. We have had some fabulous entrepreneurships. Spotify, Skype, Swedish young entrepreneurs. They sold it to the US. So that's a challenge. But that's an area where I think you should do more. Clean technology in general, renewable energy. You are too much dependent on coal and nuclear. That's not the future. So clean technology, I would say, is the second area. High quality tourism, yes. Bio-based economy, using both agriculture and biomass waste for a lot of purposes. You can do a lot of things from biomass and replace fossil fuels. So there are many examples of sectors or areas where this could happen. Absolutely. But I cannot give you detailed examples because I know too little.
I would like to ask you, and right now, like about Sigmund Freud and Erich Fromm. I'm talking about paternalism, like big dad or big mom and a small child. Ukraine is a small child, and we need someone to help us. It's like the United States of America and European Union, just to take us, take over us, say everything will be okay, you'll be safe. Do we need European Union to get a member of European Union, just to make a breakthrough, or it's too early to think about Ukraine becoming a member of European Union, or even there will be no European Union in a couple of years, in 10 years. What's your advices and your predictions?
I think first of all, I think there is a great openness and willingness on the side of the European Union to improve cooperation and finally membership for Ukraine. I have no doubts about that. The question is the pace and how to do it. And I would imagine that you wouldn't have these problems with Russia unless the European Union was not an issue. But that's one of the reasons why you have this issue with Russia. I think you could go about it in steps. And I think that the European Union, although it has its problems, it has its shortcomings, I would say that by and large, it's a very good thing for Europe, and I think Ukraine would benefit a lot from being part of it. But you don't need to be a member immediately. You can have an association, you can have a looser relationship, and then step by step improve it. Like we have seen with many East European countries. They didn't become members at once. There was a period of building confidence, helping building capacity, legal systems, etc. So that would be, in my opinion, very, very natural. And then you could also have a possibility to influence the European Union from the inside, or more closely. Because as we have said many times today, this idea about 100% free trade in a situation where some countries are so well developed and others are not, is a non-starter in my opinion. You need protection for certain areas, and you need to be able to build your capacity. And there I think the European Union with its internal market policy is making it very difficult for a country like Ukraine to fully embrace it. So there I would have at least a period of step-by-step alignment.
Anders, thank you so much for this conversation. Maybe someone want to ask question, guys. Oh, men, unfortunately not women. So we can start. Well, please ask questions.
Mr. Wijkman, thank you very much for your thoughts. You've been working many years on global issues, and I hope you have a vision how to solve the following issue. On one hand, we have global challenges, the biggest global challenges that influence on the whole humanity. On the other hand, we have an existing political and economical system which brought us to systemic crisis in all spheres. So, in existing model, political, economical, and social, we are not able to manage the global challenges. So what is the next level model for humanity in order to manage the whole planet, in order to solve these global issues? Maybe do you have a vision? Thank you.
You know, when I look at the world and the world history, because what we are in need of, according to you and according to me as well, is transformation. We need to go from where we are to a new model or a new system. To make that happen, if you look at history, those transformations only happened in the context of major crisis or major wars. I don't think there is one example of a transformation that was step by step very peaceful. That makes me rather pessimistic. On the other hand, we have in the area of the ecology and climate we have now built up a crisis-like situation over decades. So I would be surprised if not in the next 5 to 10 years we would start doing something serious about it. I think the equity problems, how to deal with widening gaps between people, is going to be more difficult, because we have this tendency that elites and incumbents, those who are in control today, they are not interested in giveaway. At the same time, maybe the social problems are the ones that will erupt the quickest and lead to crisis. I simply don't know. We have a combination of economic challenges, the whole financial system, which is very, very fragile. I very much regret when it was totally liberalized in the 1980s. And I very often quote a figure. In 1979 or 1980, the share of the financial sector of the profits in the private sector in the US was 6%. Then you had a banking system that was quite normal. In 2009, the year after the financial crisis, the profits, the share of the profits in the private sector for the finance system was 41%. And you just ask yourself, where is the value added? There's so much asset value speculation going on, and so much short-termism in that system. So those are the problems in the economic system. And then you have the social and ecological system. So, well, representing the Club of Rome, I can only say that I think we need to develop a capacity to deal with the system and not only with the parts. And we need to reform governments so that they are not working in silos, rather working more horizontally. This sounds very abstract, but that's the only way it can be done. And we have to educate people so that they understand how things are interrelated. We educate a lot of specialists. And of course, if I'm having an operation in my eye, I want an eye specialist. But I also want somebody in a medical situation that can look at the whole system. And the same goes for society. So unfortunately, I think the situation in general has to become even more acute until we can do something about it. And the fact that the American people, although not the majority, but still, the American people through the electorate system elected somebody like Trump was, of course, a step backwards. The only thing that may be good with it is that a lot of people are now being mobilized to try to unseat him next time. Because people in America are now realizing finally that politics is important. But both the political parties in America are, in my opinion, quite corrupt. They are in the hands of those who finance and fund political campaigns. Look at NRA, the National Rifle Association, the influence they have. Not even after these terrible disasters and mass shootings is there any real discussion about gun control or gun safety or whatever you would call it. So it's a totally corrupt system. So if you talk about corruption here, America is also very corrupt. Very corrupt. And I remember I met with Al Gore many years ago. We talked about, do you think there can be a carbon tax agreed upon? And he looked at me and said, no, we have too much money coming from the fossil fuel companies into the political system. So unfortunately, I don't think so. My colleagues, my former colleagues, they know what we should do, but they also know that if they do it, they would lose millions from the fossil fuel-based companies. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
Mr. who looks like Jason Statham, you want to ask a question?
Hi.
That was not a good answer. It was just an attempt.
Anders, in the light of everything you said previously, is there a good example of a social experiment that's going on right now anywhere in the world on discovering such a system that would be greater for the global environment? And is there discussion going on a more evolutionary approach to switching the system rather than getting this chaos and demand for the extreme measures? Thank you.
I was on a panel about an hour ago, and there was a gentleman, I think Ukrainian, I don't remember his name, who talked about an evolutionary approach, that there are no quick fixes. You cannot leapfrog. You have to organically move from where we are to another system. And that the level of consciousness is a key issue. I agree with that. Whether meditation, as he prescribed, is the way to get there, I don't know. My wife meditates a lot. I don't do it, but
Why?
simply because I tried and I could never really get into the habit. But the level of consciousness is, of course, a major issue here, and that's probably one of the problems, that the level of consciousness in the world is on such different levels between individuals, but also between regions, and yet we are in the same global system. And how to deal with that, I find it extremely, extremely difficult. But I would imagine if we had a few political leaders, and I've seen that in the European Union, if you had a few prime ministers that were pushing an issue, a positive issue, it was very often happening after a few years. But if you have nobody pushing, then nothing will happen. So
Be our prime minister.
But, you know, whether there are social experiments, there probably are, in different fields. There are social experiments with alternative currencies in different communities, in different parts of the world. There are experiments in a few communities, in one in Finland, with a guaranteed income to people, to prepare for the robotization of the economy when we will lose a lot of jobs, etc. And we need those experiments to learn by doing, so to say. And there is a lot of things happening when it comes to democracy at the local level, using digital technology to help. So yes, there are scattered examples, but I couldn't say that that country or that region is moving in the right direction. Scandinavia in general, I would say, we have developed quite a decent system. We have free healthcare for everyone, we have free education, we have unemployment security, etc. And we have still a high level of trust in the government and government institutions among people. Not as high as it used to be, but it's still very high. But now we have to develop it further and not just sit down and think that we have solved everything, because things are changing so fast. And I don't think we have a policy for the digital economy. We don't. And there are so many aspects of it. I'm dead scared of this whole issue of who owns the data. Before we can think, we may have a situation where Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple controls almost everything. And you know, we used to say that the fine thing with startups and entrepreneurship is that new ideas come, and they normally don't come in those big companies, they come outside those big companies. And that's very true. But in this world of data and big data, size matters a lot. And it's very difficult for a small company to compete with the big giants. So they will be absorbed. That's what I see right now. So that's just one of the aspects. And how do we deal with it? We don't have a policy. Nobody has a policy. And it's just happening around us. And citizens are not involved. Citizens are not involved at all. And developments are decided by a few individuals and a few big companies. Some of it is good, but some of it is very risky. So I think we need really to educate the political class and the political system. It was not a response to your question maybe, but at least a comment.
Anders, you're a very stylish man. You have socks Hugo Boss.
Pardon?
You have socks, Hugo Boss, like, it's for me. You're very stylish. Please, next question. Oh, thank you. Only man. Girls, what's the problem?
There is a young lady over there.
Oh, maybe young lady first.
Thanks. Thank you for your speech. And my question is about recycling. We know that recyclable production needs much more financing and much more investment. So, do you concede and do you consider it acceptable to reduce the production and to detain technical progress to some extent in order to avoid the natural collapse, to finance more recyclable economy production, I mean? And what do you think is more valuable for humanity now, to implement recycling, recyclable production, or to continue to reach technical progress? Thank you.
Well, I don't necessarily see those two as opposites. I think if the entrepreneurs and the innovators, if they knew that what they try to innovate has to live up to or comply with certain standards and design requirements, they will probably do it. But as long as they don't have those requirements put on them, they don't really care. I've talked to architects about this, and they said nobody really told us that the materials we use in a building should be easily recyclable. If you pass by a house where there is a renovation of the apartments going on, you can be dead sure that 99% of what's taken out of that apartment building is just thrown away. It's not recycled, and yet a lot of valuable stuff is there. So if the architects and the designers of the buildings would be told in advance, this is one of the requirements, this you have to live up to, I think they would do it. And the same goes with electronics and many other things. I cannot understand why we couldn't design these in a way that they were easy to dismantle. Of course it's possible. So I think your postulate that there is an opposition between technology renewal and innovation on the one hand and recycling, I don't buy that. I simply don't buy it. Maybe in the short term, but not in the long term. So I think that the problem with the European Union is they have not really put these requirements on the market. And that's what we are pushing now. And quite a number of companies are starting to see that this is a problem. You know, rare metals in this telephone, they are not so easy to obtain, not in a situation where demand is just exploding everywhere. The German government is having a conference in Berlin on the 17th of October, and they have calculated how much materials, and most of them, you know, rare earth materials, is needed for a renewable energy system in the future. And they are there's going to be one conclusion: unless we recycle those materials, it's not going to work. Just imagine how many solar panels are installed all over the world today. Do you think they are designed for recycling? They are not. And it's a lot of valuable materials, and after 15, 20 years, the solar panels have reduced their capacity, and then they have to be replaced with new ones. And of course, then you would have to take care of the materials and use them again. But they are not designed that way. So there is so much we can do to make this happen.
Please.
And I cannot see why not Ukraine would be party to this and be an active proponent of that.
Thank you for your open speech and discussion. I want to ask you one question about migration. You told, and all of us know, that there is a big crisis in European Union because of migration and refugee crisis. But what can European Union do to prevent people from migration, or what European Union can do to help them to assimilate or to be included in new society where they live better than it's now?
A huge question. You know, most people don't want to leave the place where they are born. They leave either because of warfare or because of failed states like Somalia, where there is no security, no law and order, or because of poverty and no opportunities, or they leave because of climate change. And that's going to increasingly be the case. The whole Middle Eastern region, North Africa and the southern tips of Europe, the prediction is that 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be so hot during the summer year, the half of the year of the summer, that you can only be outdoors for a certain period of time, and you have to have air conditioning. And poor people who don't have access to that, what should they do? It's also going to be very difficult to grow certain types of crops because it's going to be too hot for the crops. It's not only a question of water, it's too hot for the seeds. So I think we have to be very long-term in our thinking and understand those drivers of migration and try to address them in a pragmatic way. And one, of course, is to help countries in the neighborhood countries, like Northern Africa, like some of the Middle Eastern countries, assist them in developing functioning democracies and economies. That is, on paper, what the EU has said it should do, but it has not succeeded very well. One reason is, of course, that people in those countries, look at Egypt, etc., they are many, they are Muslims, there's a different culture, and you have now, again, a military regime. It's not easy. It's very difficult. But you have to work on those issues, to develop those regions, and to try to help stop the warfare that produces so many people moving. I mean, I've talked to, I don't know how many Syrian refugees in Sweden, and also Afghans, and they say, if my country was peaceful, I would go back. Sweden is not my favorite country. I came here because I needed protection. So I think that's the attitude you have to have. The problem in the EU right now is that some countries have this kind of an attitude and are also willing to accept, not too many, but a reasonable amount of refugees, number of refugees every year. Some countries say stop. Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, Czech Republic. They even say we don't want Muslims. And then you have a problem. And we have not been able to solve it.
It's true.
And I don't know if it can be solved. But I hope. But they are interlinked, because if the pressure on our borders is less, then I think it will be easier for us to solve it among ourselves. If the pressure is very, very big, then we have problems.
Anders, thank you so much for this conversation. My last question and we'll finish. So you do not do yoga, do you?
Yoga I do.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, but I don't meditate for hours.
And what's your favorite asana?
Well, it's really, you know...
Sunshine.
Yeah, absolutely. But I follow... My daughter is a yoga teacher. So,
really?
Yeah, I have help in my family. So that's very good.
So, like, every day we do as sun sunshine. Thank you for this conversation. Smile much more than cry. And thank you, Anders, for being so democratic, so open.